Hello and good afternoon, everyone in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Welcome to the BizLaunch SCORE workshop on understanding government procurement certifications. As you can see by the photo, it's a beautiful sunny day.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on understanding government procurement certifications. We are co-sponsoring, BizLaunch is co-sponsoring this webinar in conjunction with SCORE, our Metropolitan SCORE office. And as you can see by the photo, it's a beautiful day in sunny downtown Arlington. Just don't look outside your window. You might see a very different picture. So we welcome you all here with us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to a dynamic, very interesting, and hopefully informative session. As you can see, there's just a few logistics that we want to share with you. We want to make sure that you get the most out of this webinar, that you'll leave away with some aha moments. We will get through all of the slides and you'll be in listen-only mode. However, if you see something that perks your interest and you have a question, we'll have Melissa O'Connor, one of our BizLaunch staff members, will be moderating a Q&A session at the end. But feel free to pose the question during the presentation so you don't forget it. Also, just a note that we will be recording today's webinar, and it will be available on our website. We'll send you all that information no later than the end of this week. And I also want to say that Joe Clark with SCORE is here to do one-on-one counseling sessions. We have 3 SCORE counselors located in our office. So if this piques your interest and you have additional questions outside of the Q&A session, feel free to give us a call at our main line, and we would be more than happy to set up a personalized or customized one-on-one counseling session with you. Or feel free to give me an email. Send me an email if you have specific questions, and if we don't know, I can work with all of the counselors here to find the information for you. So really glad that you've chosen to spend this day with us. And you may be wondering, what do us look like? And I have with me today the fabulous Joe Clark, who is our SCORE counselor here at Arlington Economic Development. We're really proud to have him with us here. And also myself, I manage the small business program on behalf of Arlington County, and it's my pleasure to offer webinars such as these, networking events, marketing events throughout the year. So definitely stay tuned on that score. But I want you all to know a little bit more about Joe Clark and his background. He has over 40 years, although I cannot believe it, of experience. I saw that. I was like, wow, of providing consulting services to clients in both the federal government and the commercial sectors. He has exclusive 25 years of experience specializing in IT consulting. And so Joe really brings to the table a tremendous amount of background, professional history, and understanding of the government sector, and so I'm really grateful that he's here with us today. His experience also includes 15 years of helping a small consulting firm grow from only 12 employees to over 150. He's also served as an officer in the U.S. Coast Guard and served tours of duty in Vietnam and the Office of Boating Safety, which I just think is absolutely the coolest thing. So not only on a professional but a personal level, I'm really grateful to have you here with us today talking about government certifications.
Well, thank you very much, Tara. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about the government certification programs and what do they mean, and what do you do with those. Just by a little bit more in the way of background on things, in my time as a consultant, I spent quite a bit of time working under government contracts where I would have, we'd be competing against different organizations, and we'd always be looking for the best way of finding the right competitive situation or teaming with people where we could bring some capabilities. We spent quite a bit of time doing small business type of programs where the government sets aside procurements for small businesses, and we spent quite a bit of time using that. We were not 8A, we were not HUBZone or any of the other certifications that I'm going to be talking about today, but we teamed with a number of people that were in those programs, so I understand how the programs work and how you can take advantage of those things. I've also spent some time as a large company working with Fortune 500 companies as well as some of the largest IT consulting firms in the world. And we teamed quite a bit with small businesses where for many strategic reasons. So I've seen it from both sides of the contracting world on how do you use these certification programs and how do you use those to move toward your goals. Now, another thing I've also seen is from the government side where I've helped write technical specifications for procurements. And I've also helped clients, government clients, as they go through the acquisition process and trying to figure out, well, can we make this a small business set-aside? Can we make this an 8A set-aside? What can we do to help craft this and move this engagement forward? So my point being that I've seen this whole process work from a number of different perspectives. I do want to caution people that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a government contract specialist. I'm talking more from the operational use of these programs and what impact they have for running your business. Now, another thing that I would mention is that rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, what I've done is I've used a lot of slides and material that are available. We have a number of SCORE chapters that have put things together, and I took advantage of that. But I also got quite a bit of my material from the Washington District, Metropolitan Area District Office of the SBA. And they're very kind to put things together and have that available for me.
Oh, awesome.
So I think my point being that we pulled a lot of information together, and I think I'm going to try and talk about things as we go through here, really from the perspective as a business owner, how do you take advantage of these things? What do you do with it?
And I guess we'll be interactive as we go through.
Sure.
So if there's things that I've heard from other businesses that might pop up, we'll have the Q&A, but we'll make this interactive.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is I'll use the slides as we go through here just as a refresher of different points that we'll be talking about. Now, we're going to make these slides available, so as well as a recording of the webinar, so people will have access to these things. Hopefully people won't have to be taking copious notes as they're going through this.
That's awesome, Joe.
So if that's all right, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Let's get into this.
Just by way of understanding, I'm from SCORE. We're a volunteer organization that helps mentor small businesses as they start and as they grow. My chapter is Chapter 1, which is the Washington, D.C. chapter. We've got about 50 counselors in our chapter that cover the entire metropolitan area.
So you're just not number one, you're physically number
one.
Well,
we say we are number one, too, but there's occasionally some arguments about that. The local chapter, as I said, has about 50 counselors, covers the Washington, D.C. area, but we also have 11,500 SCORE counselors across the country in 380 some odd chapters, and those are all people that are available to you either by email, Skype. You can connect with anybody in any geographic location. You're not just restricted, even though we are the best SCORE chapter. You're not restricted just to us. All right.
Awesome. Ready for that?
Yeah. What I wanted to try and do today is really start off by saying, why are you even doing this? Why are you considering the government market? What is the advantages of it? What are the disadvantages of it? So you need to have an understanding of what your objective is. Why are you going into this? Then I want to talk about there are a number of programs that the government has set up, basically saying that there are parts of our population that have not shared in the overall procurement process. People, for whatever reason, for historically different groups of individuals, have not had a fair share at the government procurement table. And they've set up programs to allow to offset that. That's the main basis behind the certification programs. And we'll talk about what those are. And that's where I'll rely on the SBA information to say, here's what these programs are and here what their requirements are. And I'd like to quote from them rather than trying to give you my impression of what those requirements are.
As it's federal government, it is what it is. The language is very clear.
Correct. Right. And as you can expect with any government program, there are certainly nobody on this call would be guilty of this, but there are people that will try to cut an edge or try and take advantage of a program and misuse it when it's not meeting, when it's not designed for that. So,
and you could potentially get banned for life.
You can, yes, you can. If you do something bad enough, you will no longer be allowed to even bid on government procurements. And well, plus you can end up in jail. So there's some serious consequences. The point I was making is that one of the things that they're trying to do is they design these programs to make sure that there's no chance for abuse. So you'll hear a lot of rules and regulations that the SBA has in place, and those are designed to stop people from abusing the system. And that'll be part of what we'll have as our discussion. After we finish that rundown on the various types of certification programs, the next thing I'd like to do is say, okay, so what? What do you do now? How do you move forward? I'd like to try and pull that together at the end to say, here are some of the things that you might want to be considering.
And isn't the thought too, Joe, speaking of that, to get your certifications after, like, be in business for some time and then go for your certification? Yeah,
I was trying to think of an example on this, and let me take 1 minute to talk about that, and hopefully we'll set the stage for the rest of the discussion. Mostly I'm at home, and I know I am not a very good gardener. I certainly don't know a whole lot about landscaping. I know enough to get myself in trouble. So I've decided I need to have landscaping services. So I can go out there and say, I'm going to go ahead and find somebody who can do this. Now, I live in Arlington, so I've got a small plot, and I don't have a whole lot of room. Certainly something that's appropriate for a small business to be able to handle. I don't need mega cuts to come in and handle my small estate. The other thing is that I'm a SCORE counselor, so I like small businesses, and I'm going to say, I'm going to give my business to a small business because that's important to me. Now, I might also say, hey, I'm Irish, so I'm only going to find people who are Irish and own businesses owned by Irishmen and give business to them. Those are all decisions that I can make personally as I go through the process of deciding who I'm going to contract for this. When I go into this whole thing and I go out and if people come in and they hear, oh, Joe Clark likes small businesses, and they come in and hand me their brochure for auto services, well, that's not what I'm interested in. I want my landscaping
very
done.
Specific.
Okay. Or they come in and say, I'm Irish. We do a whole bunch of things. What type of things can I get a contract from you on? And I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, I want landscaping. I've got to fulfill my need. My mission is to get the landscaping looking better. I'm going to focus on that, and I need to meet that need. If in the process of fulfilling that need, I can also do something that supports small businesses or supports Irish people, then I'll do that, because that's my personal preferences. The thing that I'm getting at is that's very similar to what we're talking about with certification programs. I can tell you I have a number of people that come in to me as a SCORE counselor and say, I want to get government certification. I'm a veteran, or I'm available for the 8A program. I'm socioeconomically disadvantaged. I'm going to get my certification. I say, great. Now, by the way, I'm starting up my business. Okay, that's not good. And the second thing is, well, okay, what is it that you're going to do? We haven't decided that yet. We're going to come up to that after I get my certification. So those are all telltale danger signs. In the same case I gave you, I'm not going to have a lawn service person come in and do things for me if they've never done that before.
Right.
The fact that they're certified or in a group that I'm interested in doesn't qualify you. It doesn't take away the risk of a new startup. Yeah. So long and short, I want to get to it is that put something that you could relate to. You've got to be able to do the work that the government needs. The mission that they are trying to fill is the first thing, and it's what you should lead with.
And they know what they want.
They know what they want. They're specifying that. If on the same time you can come in and help by satisfying some need for a certification program, that's an add-on. That's the icing.
That's the icing on the cake. Okay.
The cake has got to be, what is it that you're doing of value, and what problem are you solving for the government?
Okay.
So don't tell me what else you can do. Tell me how you're going to do my lawn. Okay? That's the point I was trying to get at.
That makes sense.
All right. Shall we go into the slides?
Mm-hmm.
All right, a couple of facts, and this is sort of just to set the stage on why you would even consider this, is that not a whole lot of businesses do business with the federal government. Only 5% of the businesses in the United States are contracting with the government.
I thought there was more than that, 5%.
5% of all business. Remember, now many businesses are one or two people shops, so very small businesses, a large number of businesses. But of that total population, only 5% are doing business with the government. But they are huge. The government is pumping out over $1 billion of opportunity every single day.
Whoa.
So I think it's actually getting closer to about $2 billion now, if I remember right from some of the numbers. So there's a lot of stuff. They're buying things constantly.
A day.
Every day. Okay? And they sign 1 million contracts every year. So that's a lot of different activities, a lot of procurement activities going on. If we go to the next slide, we're going to point out a couple of things on that. Every day somebody else is getting a new contract. But the thing, and this is an interesting fact, is 95% of the federal contracts are awarded to small or medium-sized businesses. Now, that doesn't mean the dollar volume of all of these are going to 95% of the dollar volume is not going to small businesses or small or medium businesses. But of the number of contracts that are signed, 95% are going to small or medium-sized businesses.
And what's considered small and medium?
Well, there's actually definitions of that. So they have very specific definitions, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes on what is a small business. So the government is buying things all over the place, and not necessarily, I'm sure the government's buying lawn service too, to go on, continue with my analogy. They're buying everything that you can probably think about selling. They're buying it. Somebody in the government somewhere is buying that.
Yeah, I would think Department of Interior, looking at your
GSA and maintaining buildings, there's all sorts of stuff. Point being that they're a huge market, and they buy all sorts of different services. So if we go to the next slide, a couple of things that I want to point out here, and this is, I think, important for many of our customers. There are a lot of reasons why you want to go and do business with the government. For one thing, it helps diversify your risk. It lets you then have a stable base, and maybe you have some new businesses that are coming in and are short term. If you can get a government contract and put it in place, then what happens is that it gives you the stability. They're typically going to be longer-term contracts. They're typically going to have renewals so that you can then get the safer, more stable type of business as a base, and then maybe you expand out to other commercial ones to get some of the peaks on that. So you can use it to diversify your risk and to level out your cash flow issues. It can also allow you to recover some of your indirect costs. The government, on different types of government contracts, you can charge the government for your advertising and for your sales effort, and many of your overhead items are allowable expenses under certain government contract types. So that can be something that could be very advantageous to you. The other thing is it's important to keep in mind what the government's not going to do for you. First of all, you're not going to start your business with that. You have to have a track record. You have to be able to show the government at least 2 years of solid commercial work before the government will give you a direct contract. You've got to be established, so you can't just say, I'm going to start my business on that only. And if your business is in trouble, don't look to the government to be saving it. The government is going to be demanding some pretty tight margins. They are a big customer. They're a big buyer. They're going to demand the best price. They'll look for what you're selling as a commercial rate, and then they'll want a discount from that. So you're not going to make it up. You're not going to be able to save your business if it's in trouble by getting only government contracts. Are not going to help you on that. Your margins are not going to get any better. And the other thing is that if that's the only thing you're depending upon, you may not be diversified enough. Now, I have a little bit of a problem on this one point, only to the extent that I know many contractors who the only thing they do is government contracting. And they can diversify across different agencies, so they can get some of their diversification. I think the issue here is if you have one government client, as in one client in any field, then if you're totally dependent upon them, then you're at higher risk. So you need to have some diversification that way. But I do argue here that you can have only government contracts and be well diversified. Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Makes sense.
Some of the things that you may not be thinking about is that the government pays. The government pays you on time, and they have penalties that they impose on themselves if they don't pay on time. So that's a big factor when you're a small business and you're considering what your cash flow is looking like. The fact is that the government is going to be able to set up things. They can set up very profitable long-term contracts, and you can get involved in those and know that you're going to get paid. You also know that you're not going to have to chase down the customer and find them. They're not going to close shop and get out of town and not pay and leave you with a whole bunch of accounts receivable unpaid. They're going to pay what they owe you. And the fact that you are a supplier to the government can be an interesting marketing brand for you. Shows that you've arrived a little bit. You're not just a fly-by-night organization. So there's some panache that's associated with being a government contractor. All right, now what I thought I'd do was go into this next part. This is the SBA material that I'm using here. Anywhere where you see that the material was provided by the Washington Metropolitan Area District Office, I put that on there for a reason that you can use the information on these slides and quote it because it's coming directly from the SBA. Quoting something that Joe Clark says doesn't give you a whole lot of value.
Doesn't give you a lot of
doesn't get you anywhere. Right. Saying something that the SBA, that then I think you can take that a little bit more certainly.
Okay.
All right, so let's go into this. First thing is the SBA has set up, or the government, federal government has set up goals, what they're trying to do. They are trying to reserve 23% of the $500 billion a year that the government spends. They're trying to reserve, they're trying to meet 23% of that going to small businesses. And those small businesses can be in any different type of categories, about 5 or 6 programs that the SBA runs. And they each have their own types of targets that they're trying to hit. What these targets mean, this is what the SBA's goals are, how they've decided that they're going to try to distribute the procurement dollars and how that should work. They then work with the various agencies to meet these goals. And agencies may or may not have the same goals. They may be different sections on that. You may have an agency that specializes in service-disabled veterans, for example. They may do a higher number of that. But overall, the government's trying to reach this 23% with these sub-goals of veterans 3%, small disadvantaged business 5%, women-owned 5%, HUBZone. I'm going to explain all these terms as we go through this. 3%, and then everything else, including generic small businesses, is 7%.
Have they reached the 23%?
They typically come pretty darn close to it. They're within a percentage point in most years. So I think, yes, they've been successful. I'm not sure. I don't have the information on how close the sub-goals are.
Okay.
But they do come pretty close every year with the small business goal. Okay? Now, this gets back to your question, Tara, they had earlier, what is a small business? The SBA, by regulation, has defined what they mean by small business.
Okay.
And it's either going to be the number of employees that you have or the dollar amount in sales that you have. And they average your last 3 years of sales to get to that number.
And that's dependent on the industry sector.
And it's actually by your NAICS code, North American Industrial Classification System. For anybody who's not familiar with that, go to census.gov/NAICS, and it'll be the full text of all the codes, and you can search through there and find out what your NAICS code is. On the SBA's website, you can go in and search for size standard, and there you have a spreadsheet that you can download that'll give for every NAICS code exactly what are the criteria as far as the dollar amount of sales or the number of employees, which you have to be below in order to be considered a small business.
And that would be SBA.gov.
SBA.gov, and then just do a search on size standard, and then you'll come up with that document.
Okay.
Okay. But generally, in different sectors of the industry, for example, in servicing, it may be, depending upon the NAICS code, the ceiling may be 4.5 million, or it might be as high as 35.5 million. So each NAICS code has its own determination. And what you have to do is you've got to go look at that on the SBA website to get to the specific determination for yours. But generally speaking, if you're below $1 million or $3 million in sales, then probably you don't have to even look it up, because you're going to be safe to be under the size standard for being called a small business.
And just looking at wholesaling, it says 100 employees, but there's no monetary
Right. The standard is either defined by the dollar amount of sales or the number of employees.
Gotcha.
And on that spreadsheet, it'll specify which one is being used.
Okay.
All right? So that's what we mean when we say, what is a small business? Now, the other factor in there that comes into many of these definitions is when they talk about economic disadvantage, or if you're economically disadvantaged. What the SBA is going to do when they decide that, they've got to look into your personal finances. They're going to look at your income. They're going to look at your net worth. They're going to look at all of the assets that you own, and they're going to total those up. And there are different criteria that they have for what qualifies and what doesn't qualify, and we'll get into some of that in this presentation. The other thing that they're going to consider is what your spouse is doing. So if your spouse is involved in the business, then they're considered.
Okay.
If they've lent you money, then they're involved in the business. So there may be a whole bunch of things where they're going to look at the financial statements of both you and your spouse. So that's something to keep in mind as we're going through this.
Okay.
All right. So if we go to the next slide. The other thing, the big thing you need to understand is that the certification process falls into one of two categories. Either you are certifying yourself, and that means that at the time you submit your proposal to the government, if this is a procurement set aside for one group, you are making a statement to the government that I am qualified for this program. If your statement is wrong, if your statement is false, you can be prosecuted for fraud to the government. So not a good thing to do. So you want to be aware of what the requirements are, but these top ones that I'm talking about are self-certified, means that you are certifying to the government that at the time that the proposal goes in, that you qualify for this procurement set-aside. There are some other programs which are, you submit an application to the SBA and the SBA approves that. So on the self-certified flavors, you have small disadvantaged businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned business, and women-owned businesses. Now, in the women-owned small businesses, you're actually filling out the form and that information and posting it with the SBA, but that's still you certifying that. You're not asking the SBA for approval of that. In HUBZone, which we'll talk about in a bit, and the 8A program, you're submitting an application and you're not certified until you get accepted by the SBA. Right? So why don't we go ahead and get into some of these details. I wanted to make sure everybody understood how those certifications were done. The first one of the programs is the Small Disadvantaged Business, SDB, and it's, again, self-certifying. What happens is it provides a number of subcontracting opportunities, but it also allows, what you're doing here is you're certifying that you qualify for this program, and it is for socio and economically disadvantaged businesses. And I'll get into some of the details on that. And what happens is you either may be bidding on standalone or set-aside contracts for small disadvantaged businesses, or you might be working as a subcontractor, and in many cases the prime contractor has been given requirements that say, hey, you need to have this number of small disadvantaged businesses, or this amount of the work that you're doing needs to be done to subs who are small disadvantaged businesses. So you can get an opportunity as a subcontractor using your certification here, as well as going directly on bidding for it. Okay? So let's go into some of the specifics on this, because this one, people need to be aware of how you determine whether you are economically disadvantaged.
This looks complicated, Joe.
It is not.
I'm sure you have an easy formula for it.
Well, it's basically, if you look at it, you're take what your net worth is. And then, now what they're saying is, we're not going to require you to count your primary house as part of that net worth.
Okay. So you take your house.
Right. The value, your equity in the house comes off of your net worth.
Oh, good. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
In addition, if you've invested a whole bunch of money in your business, what equity you've invested in your business comes out of that.
Oh, okay.
So what we're saying, and I mean, when viewed this way, this is not a really strong statement. It's saying that if we don't count your business and we don't count your personal residence, the equity you have in that, the net worth, the money that you own after all your liabilities, is got to be less than $750,000. Now, I think it would be, you'd hard-pressed to say that somebody who has $750,000, not including their business and not including their primary residence, is not in dire straits, typically, is what that means. So I think it's a relatively loose type of definition of eligibility, but that's the minimum. You have to be able to satisfy that to be able to say that you are economically disadvantaged. Okay? Now, another category, the second category I want to talk about is where we have, and this one I find most people have some confusion on, so let me clarify some things. You've got veteran-owned businesses, and they can be two types. You can either be just a veteran-owned business, or you can be a service-disabled veteran-owned business. And there are different set-asides depending upon what category you may be in. What we're talking about is, again, whatever NAICS code you're in, you've got to be a small business. That's one requirement. Second requirement is that at least 51% of the business has got to be owned by, in the case of the service-disabled veterans, 51% of the business has to be owned by service-disabled veterans. It could be one, could be more. You've got to have that disability letter from the VA, and you have to be honorably discharged. Those are the requirements to qualify for the service-disabled veteran-owned business. The issue on there that people get confused on, there are two programs. This is the program run by the SBA. As we mentioned earlier, it's self-certifying. You're filling out the paperwork saying that you qualify on this, and the SBA manages these procurements. The Veterans Administration also has a service-disabled veteran-owned business program that they manage.
That's SDVOB? It's the same
thing, and they have their own database, and they have procurements that they will only release to people on their database.
Can you get dual certification?
You can. You can be both self-certified under the SBA program plus certified to the VA. The VA program, since it's not self-certified, My understanding is that it's taken about 9 months to get through the application process on that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's more laborious to do that, and it's something that does give you some additional benefits or access to different contracts. But
that you wouldn't get, say.
Right, because they're only issuing these procurements to people on their database.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So I want to make sure we hit all of these, that people hear all of these different certifications.
Yes.
I want to explain what's meant by that. The next one is the 8M program, and why they picked M.
What does M stand for?
It's the subset of the FAR that it is from.
Ah.
Now, why couldn't they have done 8W, which would have made a little bit more sense? But anyway,
remember, I'm part of the AW.
but we're off track here, so let me get back. Let me bring myself back. It's a self-certifying program for women-owned small businesses. It's got to be at least 51% directed and unquestionably controlled by women, one or more women. There are set-aside contracts available where only people who are service or owners of women-owned small businesses are eligible to bid on these contracts. Now, there's a subset, a different group of that. It's called economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. And I'm going to get to on this. If we go to the next slide, I'll give a little bit more detail.
And I have a question before we're seeing in a lot of these slides that you must at least have 51%. Now, back in the day, sometimes the person that was in charge didn't have the 51%. That's a recent change?
We're saying, no, I'm not sure how recent the change is, but the interpretation of the regulations is that whoever is controlling this business and has to qualify for it. And it can't be just
a figurehead.
A person that comes in, you give 10% of your share, and because they're a service-disabled veteran, and voila, you're now qualified.
I do get that question.
Right. You've got to be able to show that this is a concern managed and owned by people qualified for the program.
Okay.
Now, it's not always one person. It could be multiple people who come together. If they all qualify for this, you may have 2 service-disabled vets that come in and they join together in a partnership, and they're both qualified. They have some service disability. They may, between the 2 of them, may only own, let's say, 60% of the business, but each one of them only owns 30. That would qualify.
Oh, I see, because you can combine them together.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
It's got to be that the 51% of the ownership, the controlling interest of the business, is owned by people who are qualified for the program.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, in the women-owned business, what they ended up doing was they'd studied things, they looked at different NAICS codes that they found were underrepresented by women-owned businesses. So they looked at those industries, and you have to, in order to qualify for this program, you have to be within one of those NAICS codes. So you go to SBA.gov, you look at the Women-Owned Business Program, and they'll have a list of all those NAICS codes. So you have to understand which code you're in. Now, many of them are very, very wide-scale type of things, and I haven't really found too many people that would have a problem qualifying or saying that they're legitimately within that NAICS code. There's a lot of codes, a lot of things that I think most people would qualify. But you have to know which one it is. Now, there's a different subset of NAICS codes that they've decided are eligible for the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. And there's a lot of overlap of the Venn diagrams between these 2 NAICS code categories, but they are different. So you have to look at the program and find out which ones you qualify for.
So I could potentially qualify for the EDWOSB. So I would want to do that versus the WOSB?
It may be, depending upon what codes you qualify for. I could potentially be under the economically, I couldn't, but other economically disadvantaged women-owned small business owner who may be in a particular code of, let's say, light manufacturing pharmaceuticals. I don't know. I'm throwing the examples out there. I don't know if that's one of the ones. but I may also do something else that would qualify under just the women-owned small business under a different NAICS code, in which case then I might qualify for both programs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, and we'll talk in a moment about how this all gets turned into action. Where does it become valuable to you?
That's right.
But what you're looking for is where the government decides to set aside procurements for a particular program, you want to be able to compete on that.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next one. Then I wanted to get a little bit more clarity on the economically disadvantaged part. Obviously, the same requirements of women ownership, of one or more women who own the business, of 51% of it, and control the business. The personal net worth is $750,000. That does not include your primary residence. It does not include the equity you have in your business. Your average annual income over the last 3 years has got to be less than $350,000. The total assets, regardless of what net worth you have in there or what equity you have in it, the total assets has to be less than $6 million. Okay, and that does include the residence and the business. Okay, so the definitions of what the government is saying we mean by economically disadvantaged. Okay, next one. And this is just a slide I left in here. Basically, it says in the past there were limits on how much the contract value that they could set aside for this program. That has been lifted.
Oh.
And now they're able to go ahead and set aside contracts under this program at any dollar amount.
WS.
Right.
Okay.
For the women-owned small business programs.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Next one. Here's the next program I want to get in, HUBZone.
Yes.
And this one is all driven by the Census Bureau data.
Okay.
The Census Bureau is defining where are the historically underutilized business zones by census tracts, and that determines whether or not that you're going to have eligibility for that. As I understand from the last Census Bureau, there were none in Arlington. Is that correct, Tara?
That is still the case.
That's still the case.
That's still the case.
Different locations around the metropolitan area do have hub zones.
Baltimore, D.C.
Yeah.
Some major metropolitan areas. Unfortunately, in Arlington, we do not have. We have a track, but it's in a residential area, so you can't do commerce. It's not a commercial.
So you just have to rezone that, I guess.
I guess so. I'll see what I can do on my end.
Okay. But the HUBZone program, and go to the next slide and explain what it is. What we're talking about, they've set up requirements, and if you qualify, or if your business qualifies for this, then you're eligible for those programs that support the HUBZone and are set aside for the HUBZone program. So first of all, it's got to be a small business, so go back to the NAICS code definitions from the SBA. You've got to be owned by U.S. citizens. The principal office has got to be in the HUBZone, or in a HUBZone, not necessarily the one that you're bidding on, and at least 35% of your employees must reside in a HUBZone. So what the purpose of this program is to take these areas that have been underutilized for business and help spark growth. So they have very strict requirements on what is involved in being able to qualify for the program. You qualify for the program by not only meeting these criteria, but submitting your application to the SBA. And if you remember, this is one of those programs where the SBA certifies you. You do not self-certify for the HUBZone. Okay, let's go to this next one. This is the big one that we hear about all over here. And I think there's something like close to 2,000 8A firms in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, is what I think I remember hearing. Now, the other thing that's very disturbing that you will hear about the 8A program is I think a small percentage of the companies that are in this program ever receive a single federal government contract. It's like I heard at one point it was at 50%, and I think at one point it even got down to it's like 20% of the companies that are in the program ever get a government contract.
Whoa.
And that's tough.
That's daunting.
Because you've put in a lot of work into the application.
Yes.
And there's a lot of effort in this.
How long does the application take on generally? I was talking to somebody the other day.
I've heard the processing of about 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
But then don't forget you're going to have to put all this together, and that's going to take you another 3 to 6 months to put it all together. So
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would say if you're going to apply, figure about a year before you're really going to be able to start doing anything, assuming you get accepted.
Okay.
All right. The thing to keep in mind on this program, it's a 9-year program. It has training, it has help, it has teaming arrangements that are available. There are many things that you can do in addition to just being eligible for these government set-asides. But what it is, it's a support program. It is not designed for a startup. That's the first thing you got to remember. It's designed for you to have already established your business, and now you want to accelerate your business by going into government contract. What I want to do is walk through the eligibility on this. First of all, you got to be a U.S. citizen, and we have social and economic disadvantage requirements. I'm going to talk about some of those in just a minute. The social says that you've got to be able to prove to the government that you are of a group of our population that has been historically disadvantaged in procurement. By default, different ethnic groups, racial groups are defined as being underrepresented in these businesses. So Hispanic, Black, a number of different categories are automatically assumed to be in that group. You can make application that you're in some other group. I could say, you know, bald-headed Irishman or disadvantaged, and I can make application to the SBA, but the burden of proof is on me. And if I can prove that I'm socially disadvantaged, then I could apply.
Okay.
Only the socially disadvantaged group can then go through the test of whether you are economically disadvantaged, and you have to be both in order to be in the program. You've got to own, the people who are disadvantaged have to be owners, 51%. They've got to control, and it's got to be their full-time job that they're managing this business. They have to, you cannot be debarred, you can't be in trouble on parole or any other difficulties in your personal history, and you've got to have 2 years of track record that says you've been doing this, and this is where you're, what makes code you've been doing the business in. And it's got to be laid out. Now, there are waivers for that. I personally argue that the waivers are a misuse because I never recommend people take the waiver or try the waiver, because what you're doing is you're giving up some of that time that you have in the program. If you spend your first 2 years getting your act together, getting your business up and running, if you get 8A certification right from the beginning, then what's happening is you're wasting 2 out of the 9 years and just getting yourself up to speed. So I recommend get yourself going, get established, and then get in the program. Okay. And obviously the other part of this is you got to be in a small business by the SBA standards. Okay. We'll go to the next one. Here's where we get into some of this eligibility. Now, this one has a little bit of a twist to it, okay? First of all, there are rules that you have to have an income of less than $250,000 a year, and they'll average that out over the last 3 years. Your business owner net worth may not exceed $250,000. And again, we're going to do the same calculation as before. We'll remove the primary residence and we'll remove your equity in the business to decide that. But the total of your assets cannot exceed $6,000 regardless of what equity position you have in those. Now, there are some other factors that says basically during the 9 years of the program, you've got to stay within that balance. So if you go above, typically if it's above $350,000 of income during the 9-year program, you can lose your eligibility for the 8A program. Same thing with your net worth. Now, those numbers change a little bit depending upon the size of the business. As in any of these questions, I'm just giving the first level of information. If you're serious and want to get into any of these certification programs, the next step is to get on the SBA website, find out what the requirements are specifically, and then talk with the SBA to make sure, or a counselor to get into the details of what are the criteria and whether or not because there are nuances that change depending upon what your situation. for example, and this is one example I've seen people get in trouble on, is a thing they call affiliation. And what affiliation says is that, for example, if you're an 8A applicant and your 2 years of business work have all been as a subcontractor to a large defense contractor, and that's the only business you have, then there's an affiliation here. It could very easily be that that large defense contractor has put you up to be a 8A so that they can then sub to you and use your set-aside for 8A programs. So if you only have one customer, then they'll say there's too strong an affiliation between that large firm and you, and therefore you will not be accepted to the program. So there are things like that that you've got to check with the SBA as you go through it. They're really trying to make sure, as they should, that nobody is misusing or trying to come into this program through fraud. And there have been cases where a lot of big publicized cases are articles in the Washington Post a couple of months ago.
Some local ones,
right?
Okay.
All right, let me hit this last part, and then I want to turn it open. I think we've maybe not left enough time for Q&A, but let me keep pushing, right?
Okay.
Next steps. What do you do with all this? The biggest thing, and this is the one I want to stress more than anything else, lead with the value of what the product or services that you're offering. Don't lead with certification. Find out what are you doing, what are you doing to make the customer's life better, and lead with that as a discussion. Don't go in leading with what certification program you're in. Once you identify what it is that you're going to sell, figure out who wants to buy that. There are a whole bunch of tools available to help you do that and identify which agencies are buying what. Then make sure you're in the right codes. Make sure if there is a set-aside program that you can qualify for, make sure you understand what that is, whether it's self-certified or being certified by the SBA. Once you've identified all those things, get those in place and then register. Many people I see start registering right from the very first beginning, and they haven't done the research to figure out who they're going to market and what it is that they're going to sell. So you've got to reverse that, and you've got to lead with the value and then figure out how to do the registration. Okay? And for one thing I want to point out on the next slide is with these certifications, these are valuable beyond the federal government level. Many state agencies, universities, transportation places will buy things off of these programs. So having that certification is applicable at the local level, and you should be looking into that because that is a procurement opportunity that may be valuable to you. Okay? And that was it. I went a little bit longer than I had hoped, but I think this information I know is of interest to a lot of people, so we wanted to put this out there and give some flesh to the discussion of what this means and how would you make use of it.
Great. I mean, I thought it was we get a lot of questions within BizLaunch on this topic, especially some of the nuances there that could kind of trip you up if you don't understand it correctly. And I think one of the biggest things that we see also is that people are in a rush to get the 8A, but really I think from after listening to you today, you really have to be very strategic and think it out first.
Yeah, all of these certification programs are taking up some of your bandwidth. So don't spend your time doing these things until you know that you're in a position where you're going to take advantage of it. And that's got to be, you're not going to be a prime contractor until you have 2 years of track record. So get your act together, get your service identified and the product or service you're selling and value proposition established, and then worry about the certification afterwards.
Well, Melissa, I'm going to check in with you to see if we have any questions on the line from our audience.
We do. We have a few questions. Let's see. The first is the 8M WOSB certification different from the women-owned small business self-certification, or is it separate?
No, that's the same thing. 8M is the women-owned small business program. And those two terms are interchangeable, and they are self-certified programs.
Okay, great. And then the next one will be, what is the set-aside breakdown between 8A and general self-certified small businesses, i.e. what is the benefit of going the 8A route?
The 8A route is valuable if procurements have been set aside for that program and it's something that you're ready to do. What happens on a lot of the certification programs that have set-aside aspects to them, if the agency says, hey, I want to do this work, and you can prove to them that there are sufficient firms within the program that are able to do that, the agency many times will set aside that procurement for that program. So if in the example of the 8A, then if you can convince them that there are enough 8A companies that can adequately fulfill the requirements, the contracting officer will legitimately set aside that procurement so only 8A companies can bid on it. So that gives you a little bit more advantage. Now, there used to be advantages of sole source justifications allowed under the 8A program. I'm finding that those are, you're seeing those far fewer. So in the past, you could even go directly to a specific 8A company and award it to them without any other competition. That was part of the program. I find that those are, you're seeing less of that because just the too many abuses are possible under that, and so they don't want to do that. Okay.
Additional questions?
Yeah, we have one that asks, what is a specific form or paperwork required to self-certify as a WOSB? They said they found a single PDF form on the SBA website, but they weren't clear if that's the only form.
Yeah, and again, I have not filled that out myself. So but it basically is that's the form. You fill it out and you submit it. The women-owned small business certification process is a little bit different than some of the others because you're filing that with the SBA. Now, with the economically disadvantaged women-owned business, the reason they have to file with the SBA is so they can verify the economic criteria have been met. So that's why you're filing those with the SBA. But otherwise, self-certification is something you do when you submit your bid.
Okay, great. And then we've had a few questions about just the presentation itself and if it will be available. So we will have the slides available and the recording available as well.
Great.
Okay. Well, this looks like this is the conclusion of our webinar on federal government certifications. I want to thank you, Joe Clark, for your wealth of information and clarity and a lot of these different, could be somewhat complex certification processes. We really appreciate you coming out and look forward to doing more. And just so everybody knows, like I said in the beginning, we are available for one-on-one consultations. So if you have additional questions or you think of something later on, feel free to give us a call and set up an appointment and meet with us today. And thank you all so much. Enjoy your day, and we will see you in another BizLaunch webinar very soon.